At this point, it's my pleasure to introduce Pastor Matthew Fleming from St. Andrew Lutheran Church in Eden Prairie for our invocation. Matt is a 2009 alum of Concordia College. He came here, that is to say, he came to the Red River Valley to go to college from the Napa Valley in California. No doubt drawn by our reputation in the upper Midwest for excellence in wineries. But in truth, my guess is, knowing that Matt is an alum not only of Concordia, but of the Concordia Choir, of the Temple Band, and of various vocal ensembles, that it was probably music that drew him to us from across the country, reversing Horace Greeley's dictum and going east instead of west. Demonstrating his own entrepreneurial spirit by participating in the startup of a socially conscious internship program known as Upturnships during his seminary years. Matt's ministry at St. Andrew lives at the intersection of creativity and faith. We're very proud of him and the work that he does. Please welcome Matthew Fleming.
Thank you, President Kraft, for the kind words. My wife and I were up in the Red River Valley once again visiting my father-in-law and mother-in-law, and we turned on Prairie Public Television, which is probably the highest production value TV I've ever seen. Am I right? It was a couple of guys at a desk and maybe a camera in the corner and a pair of lights. But after that, we watched an excellent documentary about the musical Hamilton. And my wife and I were struck by a phrase out of those words. How lucky, look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now. And we were struck for a moment that I don't know that we felt lucky to be alive. Amidst one of the most contentious political battles in our nation's history, with childhood poverty all around us, with war and famine and scarcity around every corner, are we lucky to be alive right now? But then, of course, history has been made. History has been made for the first time in 108 years, as last night the Chicago Cubs won the World Series. Amen? But of course, we can be grateful for much more. And if in 499 years, as this year we celebrate the 499th year anniversary of the Reformation, maybe the most inventive thing that Martin Luther came up with, the most entrepreneurial invention of the Reformation, is an attitude of gratitude, of being grateful for the world that we have been given, the possibilities that God imagines for our lives. An attitude of gratefulness and of gratitude can transform the way we look at ourselves and the way we look at the world around us. I was taking my daughter to work the other day, and we pulled up into the parking lot, and of course I pulled out my phone immediately. There was business to do, work to get done. There was an email that I was reading, and I heard behind me a mumble, "Daddy, something, something." I kept reading my email. A second time I heard, "Daddy, mumble, mumble, mumble." I kept reading my email. The third time I heard, "Daddy, dear." And I said, "What, honey?" I put my phone back down in the cup holder, and she said, "Daddy, dear." And she pointed 4 feet away from us were 2 deer, a mom and a fawn, just looking right at us. And in 2 seconds they were gone, running off into the woods again. And in that moment, I was pulled out of my own thinking. I was pulled out of the busyness of the day, of the concerns that I had to work with, and God intervened and gave me a moment of grace. These moments are around every single day, and I'm sure I missed 99 more before I got to work that morning. But I was able to receive that one. So look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now. Let us pray. Holy God, we give you thanks for the many gifts that you give us. Help us to be good stewards of your gifts, to be creative just as you created this beautiful world, to be creative in the face of immense issues and problems in our daily lives and around the planet. Help us to honor the college that helped us grow. Help us to honor the mission to influence the affairs of this world for betterness, for gratefulness, for your hope and peace in the world. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I hope you've enjoyed your breakfast, and as we begin our program, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Stephanie Lundquist, a 1998 graduate of Concordia and the newest member of our Offutt School of Business Global Leadership Council. Steph serves as Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer for Target. What a remarkable journey it's been for her. After graduating from Concordia in 1998, Steph was recruited to be a manager in Target's former department store business, Dayton's, where she led a group of 60 people. She continued to build her experience at Dayton's and eventually at Target through a number of leadership positions in operations, business integration, and ultimately human resources. Steph has had the opportunity to lead nearly every facet of the HR organization, from talent acquisition to talent management, strategy integration, as well as stores and distribution HR. Prior to taking on her current role earlier this year as Chief Human Resources Officer, Steph helped build Target's transformation office and led corporate HR. Today, she oversees the entire HR organization that recruits, develops, and engages more than 340,000 Target team members across the globe, leading the charge to build an innovative workplace second to none in retail. We're extraordinarily proud to claim her as an alumna, and we're so thankful to have her moderating today. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie Lundquist.
All right, thanks for the warm welcome, Dean Doran. As she mentioned, I am incredibly proud to call myself a Concordia alumnae, a Cobber, absolutely. I cherish the wonderful liberal arts education that Concordia gave me, and I still feel a deep connection to the school. I grew up in a really small town in southern Minnesota, and like many Concordia students, I worked my way through college, and so I'm really grateful for the help along the way from generous scholarships and support of other alumni. And that first role at Dayton's that Dean Doran mentioned, it was actually a professor at Concordia that helped me land that interview that got me that first job. I'm also grateful for Concordia and the role it's played preparing me to take on some of life's biggest challenges. And I'm reminded every day of Concordia's mission to make a difference in the world, because the school made a really big difference in my life. One of the best things about working at Target is that I get to fulfill that same mission every single day by serving and leading and making a difference in the lives of those hundreds of thousands of team members across the globe. And whether they're with us at Target for a year or their entire career, I have an amazing, talented, and passionate HR team that I lead that's dedicated to ensuring our team members have the skills, the knowledge, the resources, and the encouragement to grow and thrive at Target. Our role in the organization has never been more important. At Target, we're going through some very massive change and transformation, and we're tackling some really big challenges. And a critical component is infusing innovation across the organization. We've hired many entrepreneurs in residence, which is new for us, fostering innovation. We are creating engineering mentoringship programs. We are working with nonprofits like Girls Who Code that develop and bring diverse and talented workers to Target. We also have had great success with accelerator programs, the first of which started for us in Bangalore, India, and then just recently we have a similar program here in Minneapolis. We worked with Techstars to help new startups develop ideas to improve Target's business, but also the entire retail industry. We've signed a number of deals with a number of participants, and many have actually relocated here to the Twin Cities, helping us further establish Target as a regional leader in innovation and change the area's tech culture. So when I was asked if I would introduce Phil Soran today to all of you, I have to tell you I was thrilled. We share a passion and commitment to innovation. In fact, Phil actually mentored 2 of our startups as part of our TechStars program, and we've enjoyed a great partnership. But the first thing you need to know about Phil is that at heart, he is a serial entrepreneur, and he's made quite a mark on technology. Phil has founded companies that have generated thousands of jobs. But even more important, he has a track record of building successful businesses with really strong corporate cultures. In 1995, Phil co-founded Xiotech in the basement of his home. 5 years later, the network storage company or storage vendor was acquired by Seagate for $360 million. In 2002, Phil founded another company. You guessed it, in his basement. Phil, I'm beginning to think that I am definitely really inefficient with how I'm using my basement. So Phil's second tech company, Compellent, went public in 2007, became one of the fastest growing storage companies in the world before being acquired by Dell a few years later for nearly $1 billion. Most recently, in 2015, Phil and his 2 partners launched Flipgrid, a startup based on some fabulous technology developed right here in Minneapolis at the University of Minnesota. And as the company's executive chairman, he has helped secure more than $17 million in funding for this unique tool, which helps people and companies create and share videos around specific topics. It's a fascinating piece of technology that we at Target and many other companies are looking at how to potentially leverage to better connect and collaborate. Another thing you need to know about Phil is that he's really made his mark on the industry. The Minneapolis-St. Paul Journal named him to its Titans of Technology Hall of Fame, honoring him as their first Lifetime Achievement inductee. And Ernst & Young and Eldorado Ventures have recognized Phil as Entrepreneur of the Year. The last thing you need to know about Phil is he's retired. Though I have a hard time believing this. But I also have to mention he's a father of 4, a great husband, and a grandfather. And of those 4, he has 3 daughters, all 3 of which are expecting. So he is going to be a very busy grandfather. Nowadays, he splits his time 3 ways. At work for VidCoo, having fun, which I think might be related to being a grandfather, and deeply involved in education reform. Phil is working with several high-performance inner-city schools in the area, as well as Teach for America and Education Transformation Initiative. As I've gotten to know Phil, I'm struck by how Concordia, Target, and Phil all share an aligned passion for giving back and making a difference in the world. And Phil really has had tremendous impact. So, Phil, we are honored to have you here today and to listen and learn from you and your experiences. Please join me in welcoming Phil Soran.
Thanks, Stephanie. That was good. Thank you very much. All right, so I'm an old junior high math teacher, and one of my former employees, Pete, was saying, you got to use your claps. So we always did this at the company. We have to give Stephanie 3 hands. You ready? 1, 2, 3. These cobbers are smart. I love it. Most adults cannot handle that exercise, so that's really good here. Well, I didn't know the Cubs won. I went to bed to get ready for this. That was great, huh? I did wake up to see what happened there. I did that there. So I'm real excited to be here. I'm going to just start with a line here and see how many people have ever heard this line here. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Have you ever heard of it? Well, so that's kind of was my theory. Somebody else came up with that moniker, but it actually kind of said how I try to run my companies. And so I'm going to talk to you about culture. And a lot of companies talk about culture. Some people practice it. And I really thought that we did that at my companies. And I knew it kind of sunk in when employees started telling me, we named our culture, positive aggressive. And employees started coming and telling me that they are now starting to practice positive aggressive in their personal life, not just at work. So that kind of said it's not it's not me they have to say it because I'm saying it's positive aggressive. They're actually, it's sinking into them. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit here today. And a little bit, I'll try to do it in a fun way here. I'll tell you some stories, so you have a little laughter there. There's a lot of fun when you start in the basement with two engineers. And I'll talk a lot about the culture, both personally and corporate-wise. I've heard people tell me there's over 25 good nuggets in my talk, so hopefully you get 3 or 4 you can go away with this morning and use here. And then I'll end kind of just real quickly on the Minnesota entrepreneurial environment, because I think it's actually starting to take off, but there's a lot we have to do there to help it out. So I got to tell you, I've started getting associated with Concordia through Greg, I think, Greg Tavine here. And you guys, this is a positive aggressive university. That's all I can say here. Or college, I should say, right? But that you guys just epitomize it. So it'll be easy to talk to you. I probably won't be able to teach you as much as if I went to some other lower rate university or college here. So it's a real honor to do it. I'm going to give you some food for thought. I got to tell you, I'm going to tell you about all my victories. And there were failures before some of these. So I'm only going to tell you the good stuff. So I always want to tell you that because a lot of people think, oh, it just looks easy when you do it there. But there were failures in there. And you actually, as you know, learn from those failures that help you when you do the victories. And so just remember, history is written by the victors, and I'm up here, so I get to tell you just the good stuff here. So let's kind of get into positive aggressive. And I think kind of the feeling you get with positive aggressive is kind of captured in this quote from Maya Angelou. The people will forget what you said. They'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And positive aggressive is all about that. After somebody dealt with our company, they had a feeling, and you have the same thing. You know, this breakfast, you might have met somebody new. They left a feeling with you here. So that's what it's all about here. So how many people ever worked for a negative aggressive company? Anybody there? I don't have to tell them much. It's not fun, right, Pete? It's a tough deal here, right? Poor Pete's going to get picked on here, right? I'll come back to that here. So anyway, here's positive aggressive. So the aggressive part is about winning. So our company, we wanted to get the order. We fought as hard as anyone else. We wanted the lowest price from our vendors. In school, you want to get the best grades. I mean, aggressive is about winning. And so you're going as hard as you can to win. But positive is about how you win and how you lose, too. So that's the big difference. And other people are just aggressive, but they don't do the positive part of it. So I asked you about positive aggressive companies. How many people have gone to junior high school? You've experienced negative aggressive. As a former junior high math teacher, you know, if you kind of think about a junior high kid, they don't bully the person next to them because they're mean. They do it to look cooler or to elevate themselves, or they look more popular, whatever. So it's kind of a Freudian thing how it works here. So people aren't negative aggressive because they're bad people. How many people are going to listen to the politics? I mean, I don't have to go any more there, right? That's a pretty negative aggressive environment there. Positive aggressive is a powerful thing if you start doing it here. So I think I started positive aggressive younger than I thought. And Greg Tavine loves this story, so I always add it in here just for him here. But so I'm 11 years old. I grew up in South Denver. I'm there with our 6 kids. We had 6 kids in the family or whatever. And the Denver Nuggets professional basketball team is starting up. Turns out they're called the Denver Rockets back then. And so I, on my own, call the season ticket office and tell them that I want to be their ball boy. And I left my name and number at the season ticket office. Well, a month before the season started, the trainer, Lloyd Williams, calls my house and said to my mom, we'd like your son to be the ball boy for the Denver Nuggets, the Denver Rockets. And she thought it was some pedophile or something calling. I mean, I had not told her I had done this here. Well, I got my first job as the ball boy for the Denver Rockets. So I was the ball boy for 2 years. You wouldn't do this to your kid now. I took the number 5 bus from South Denver into downtown Denver by myself, 11 years old, got off, went over, put on my little ball boy jersey, which was made for somebody much older than me, and it'd be down below my knees and stuff. And I was the ball boy for the Denver Rockets for 2 years, the best first job you could possibly have. So the theme there in positive aggressive is you should reach high and try for the unexpected. It doesn't mean you're going to always get it when you try for the unexpected, but if you don't reach high, you'll never get a chance to do it. So that was kind of a fun story about how I started getting into positive aggressive. Well, the second lesson from positive aggressive is to turn your liabilities into assets. So it's kind of funny you brought up the Horace Greeley line here, but so I went to school at the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, Colorado. I always debate whether to do this or not, but I always joke UNC stands for University of No Credit. Now my wife went there too, and she gets really mad when I say that. She said I worked pretty hard. Well, I came out of the University of Northern Colorado as a school teacher. So here is a picture of me at my, they take the school day pictures. Well, they do the teachers too. So this is me, my first job in Milliken, Colorado. I made $9,900, and I taught 8 classes during the day, did lunch duty, and then coached 2 teams at night. And I hung on for a dear ride. I was the math department at Milliken Middle School, so it was a fun job. Well, I later on, I was ready to leave teaching. I did that for 4.5 years, liked it. I just couldn't see myself teaching the same algebra class for 30 years. So I said, I'm going to do something different. And I did a cold call, another one of those cold calls to IBM. And I was lucky that IBM hired me. Now, you talked about starting up the computer science degree. Now, back then, this is 1982, there weren't many computer science degrees. So what IBM would do is they'd hire technical people and train them on the computer industry. And so I was one of those lucky people with a math degree. They hired me, and they sent me off to Dallas, Texas, to get trained for a whole year. You'd go for a month, you'd come back for a month. So I go to my first class at IBM in Dallas, and back then IBM was the most admired company in America for like 10 years straight. I mean, they picked the cream of the crop. So I'm in my first class, and they're introducing everybody in the class. I'm Soran, so I'm in the back of the room here. People start standing up and introduce themselves. They went to Concordia, they went to Stanford, they went to Brown, they went to Harvard. And I'm going, I went to Northern Colorado. This isn't good. So I got up and introduced myself, made a joke about it, and I called my wife that night and said, I'm in over my head. I'm not going to make it. Now, I have my first daughter now. It's 2 weeks old when I left her that class. I honestly didn't think I'd be able to cut it. And what ended up happening is IBM would rank you at every single class you went to, 1 to 30. And I ended up being number 1 in every class. And the reason why is I had taught junior high math. So all these people were book smart, but they couldn't dance on their feet. They couldn't do presentations. So it turns out what I thought was a liability was actually an asset. So that's where you got to turn your liabilities into an asset. And a lot of times you think it's a negative when actually you can turn it into a positive. That's true stories there too. I was very nervous when I called my wife that night. Let's see here. Number two with positive aggressive, you need to take care of those who got you there. So this is 1995. I'd moved up here with IBM. I'd been moved. And I went to work I didn't want to move back east to White Plains, New York with 4 kids now. And so I decided I'm going to go do something a little more entrepreneurial. Went with a software company that later got sold. And so now I decided to start a company with 2 guys in my basement in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. The basement, let me describe it here, was concrete floors. We had a ping pong table for our desk. We actually put a phone down there so we could do a little call for raising money. And it started with 2 engineers. And engineers, as you know, are very to themselves. They're introverts, and I'm the external guy raising the money. And so we drove around and we raised $886,000 of angel investor money. And quite an experience. I'll tell you one story here that we're driving around raising money with my used car, my engineer friend, one on the right, one in the back seat, and I turn to my partner, John, and I go, John, you got to know at least one rich person we could introduce our product to. And he looks at me with the most serious look on his face, and he said, none that I'd introduce us to. So, that's a true story. So, engineers, they're just different cats, right? So, I always like to say my rich friends got richer, and his didn't. It turned out one of my investors actually are Ben Whitney. But there's another fun story. A guy named Joe Newman we raised a lot of our money at the Olympic Hills Country Club bar here in town. And we said one guy I knew there, and he kind of started introducing us to all his friends. And we'd go over and do these little pitches. We'd get them liquored up, and then we'd try to ask them. No, we'd do the presentation, and we did it one day, and this guy goes, come on, Phil. And I'd met him one time in my life, Joe Newman. I've seen him one time in my life. He had this little ponytail, older guy. He goes out in the parking lot, reaches in his glove box, writes me a $50,000 check, and said, I'm going to Vegas tomorrow. Make sure I get in your deal. So I always like to joke that Joe, my partners didn't know what was going on. Here I go out in the parking lot with the Joe, and something's going to happen out there. And Joe ended up making $1.5 million on that $50,000 investment. So it was pretty cool. The whole theme here about take care of those who got you there is that when you start raising venture money, venture capitalists are better at negotiating terms. And so one thing I did is said to the VCs, you need to give the angel investors the same terms that you got. And that statement right there cost my partners and I about $1.5 million, but that's the right thing to do because they're the ones that took the most risk on you. You got to take care of them there. So In Positive Aggressive, you take care of those who got you there and don't just think about yourself. You create traditions, too, with Positive Aggressive. And this is one I tell you can take home for your personal life and for your business life here. People are looking for traditions now. They want those little stories that they know they do it. Like if you don't have the favorite pie at Thanksgiving, your kids are going to tell you about it, right? Now, they complain about it while you're making it, but if you don't have it there when Thanksgiving dinner comes on, people like traditions. Well, companies like traditions, too. So one thing we did at Xiotech, after we sold the company to Seagate for $360 million, we said, well, we're going to get everybody a Super Bowl ring. So I went to Jostens, that does the real Super Bowl rings, and paid them to design a female and a male ring. And then we went to the Olympic Hills Country Club bar where we raised the money and had a ring sizing party. So when we announced the deal, people were excited as opposed to, oh, I'm going to lose my job. They all got stock options, they got stay bonuses, and they got a Super Bowl ring. So create traditions both in your personal life and your business life, and you'll be glad you did it. So we did that. We stayed there a little bit, and then I retired for a while. And then my two partners and I started talking again, and we went back to the same basement and said, let's start another company. How many people have ever heard of Compellent? You heard about it before? This is 2002. We go back to the basement. Now, we were a little soft and cushy because we had carpeting. We had a desk. We actually had a real whiteboard to do a little work on. It was pretty fancy now, right? So a little different here. We went right to venture capital, and over time raised about $53 million of venture capital here. And both these companies were in data storage. And what we invented, the first company was called the Storage Area Network. And then in the second company, we invented a lot of software techniques like automated tiered storage and thin provisioning, stuff I'm sure I could tell you about, but you don't want to hear. So it's 2002. We're back in the basement. We raised the money. We get going. It was a really fun ride. We went public in 5 years on the New York Stock Exchange. That's quite a ride. I recommend everyone do that once in their life. We did, let's see what else. We sold in 2011 to Dell, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. We had a great culture. I mean, it was just a fun ride that we did there, and it really kind of impacted the whole computer industry. So you get everyone involved in Positive Aggressive, and I'm going to tell you a story about our co-pilot group. And in tech companies, the service group, the support group, is usually kind of the lowest. They don't get the credit they deserve and stuff. What we did is we wanted to make them a differentiator for Compellent. So we had all this great software, but if you don't support your stuff, it shows in the customer satisfaction. So we said, let's have our support stand out. And so one of the things I tell you to do in companies, you can only brand so many things. And you have like the corporate brand, but I'm talking about things that really differentiate you. So we named it Copilot. And the whole thought was, when a customer called in and they're on the phone, they're in the cockpit with that customer. So if they don't land, you don't land. It's kind of the image I wanted to leave with the co-pilots. And that also meant you have the authority to do what you need to do to make it work. So if you need to ship some equipment right away, you just do it. I mean, so they kind of felt like they're empowered. Well, pretty soon they started getting so many kudos from the customers, and they just kind of moved up their rank, and they're viewed in the company. Engineers viewed them as equals as opposed to kind of looking down at the support guys. And so those co-pilots, when we'd have our customer worldwide sales conference or user conferences, the customers, they wanted to meet, not me, they wanted to meet their co-pilot. So they actually used the words. And when we sold to Dell, I can tell you that Michael, Dell, and I were on a stage one time, and a bunch of my customers came out to meet him and stuff, and they were like poking him in the chest, don't screw up Copilot. So that's all they could tell him is how important that support was, which is not usually the organization they do. So with Positive Aggressive, you get everyone involved. And you also recognize people, and this is a fun story, I think, to tell here. So we're going public. You do the IPO roadshow, which is a grueling experience. I recommend everybody do it once. So to give you an example, I did 69 presentations in 11 days in 4 different countries, flew 25,000 miles. You're physically exhausted. And as they say, you have to give the 69th presentation with the enthusiasm of the first, and you have to give the first presentation with the polish of the 69th. So that's what you did. My CFO and I go. They have a little private plane. I recommend everybody do that too. That's a good way to do it. But that's the only way you can get around, right? So an example of a day on the IPO roadshow, I wake up in Frankfurt, give 4 presentations, take 2 calls on the way to the airport, fly to Milan, 2 presentations, 2 calls on the way to the airport, fly to London, do 12 presentations the next day, go to New York. I mean, that's the pace you're on there, so pretty fun. Well, the last stop we have is Minneapolis. In fact, in this tower, actually, we had the last meeting with potential investors. And what you're doing is you're drumming up interest in your stock. And so we're on this nice private plane. So I called my partner and said, there's empty seats here. Why don't you get some of the engineering and manufacturing managers to come with us for opening day at the New York Stock Exchange. So they are so excited. They got buffed up and wore their suits and everything there. And the fun story is my head of manufacturing, Scott McGrath, who I'd never seen in anything but jeans and a Pendleton shirt. He might have a short sleeve shirt in the summer, I don't know. But I mean, here is in this tan suit, looking slicked back hair, a smile on his face, all buffed up like the Wizard of Oz had, he got cleaned up for the wizard. And so Scott's there, we're on the floor of the exchange, and he reaches in his coat pocket and pulls out these papers. And the papers are from the last time he wore his suit. And so it's kind of fun. What is it, Scott? And he goes, it's a ticket on Braniff Airlines. Now, it's only the older people laughed at that joke. Braniff last flew in 1982. So I said, Scott, you still fit in that? That's unbelievable, man. That's impressive. So this is us actually ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange a month later after the opening here. And I think I'll tell a quick story. I won't tell. So you can see us up there ringing the bell. You can see the guy next to me is John Thain, the CEO of the New York Stock Exchange. He left a week later to go be the CEO of Merrill Lynch, which he later sold for $1. But John, at the New York Stock Exchange, they clap for you for a minute, and then 10 seconds before the start of trading, that you ring the bell. And so I'm ringing the bell, and John Thain used to be on the far right of the stage, his right. And in that 10 seconds, he had boxed out my partner, who was almost falling off the stage behind him there, because at 9:30, that's when MSNBC, Fox News, they all take their picture of who's there that day. And he always wanted his face in the picture. So John boxed out my partner, Larry, and got the recognition. But you always recognize and that's all my employees. Our families are right below us. That was a fun time. It was really good. You also celebrate milestones. I talk about those traditions. So we had a tradition at Compellent that whenever you got an order, you would ring this gong. And it started out with one of our sales admins, Janine Nagel, had this, she probably got a white elephant gift, and she brought it in to get rid of it out of her house, but this beat-up old gong. And when you got an order, you'd hit the gong. Well, even people across the world, when they got the order, they'd want to hear the gong ring for the order. Is this true, Pete? So then one of our lawyers loved the story. And when we went to the New York Stock Exchange, she went with us, and she bought us a nice gong. Well, guess what happened? No one wanted to ring the fancy gong. They wanted to read the traditional gong, right? This is traditions come out. So we then said, well, let's do a tiered gong system. Big orders, you get a bigger gong. Little orders, you get a little gong. So they started using the bigger gong. Not enough, but they used it. So when we sold the company to Dell for $1 billion, we got a big gong. And this is Michael and I ringing the gong together, and you should have seen the look on his face when I thanked him for buying me a gong. He thought, what are we doing here, right? So I always joke that we started in the basement. You probably heard B2B, business to business. Well, this is B2B, basement to billion. So that's the new line there. So there we are. Be sure you celebrate your milestones. And those little things, it's not, you get a big commission or whatever. The little recognition is what really makes a difference for employees. You don't have to have the big fancy ones. They just want to know that they do a good job. Peers need to be able to recognize each other. We always did little things like you can give movie tickets to somebody if they do something for you. I mean, just those little things can go a long way. So recognition is a very important thing in positive aggressive. Steph kind of talked about what I'm doing now, kind of a third. So I'm doing a lot of philanthropy. I try to do trampoline charities. That's where they catch people and throw them back in the air as opposed to catch them. So education as a former teacher. My wife's a former teacher. That's why we're doing a lot with education. And through that, I met the dean of the College of Education at the University of Minnesota, who then introduced me to Flipgrid. And Flipgrid was designed by a professor in the College of Education, used in 6 countries now, 6 continents. I think there's 30,000 classrooms using it. We're now going into the corporate market. So if you're involved in training, coaching, mentoring, education, we'd love to have you look at Flipgrid. Just go on the site, give me your card, we'll hook up with you. And so we're doing that now, and we're down here in North Loop. There's kind of a picture of what you can do. You can self-brand your Flipgrid. I won't get into too much sales here. So now I'm going to switch over to what you can personally do to be more positive aggressive. And the first thing is, on your journey to positive aggressive, start with the positive first, then go aggressive. If you go the other way, you might have some unintended consequences. If you go aggressive first, then go positive, that's not a good strategy. So that's number one. Number two, be about your others, not yourself. So you're going to learn more in 2 hours by asking somebody about them than you are talking about yourself for 2 days. So you got to do that. And if you really think about it, I can't tell you the number of times my wife would come back from a party or you're there and she goes, you know, no one ever asked me one thing about myself. It's kind of an interesting thing. You start watching that in your conversation. So spend more time on them, and you'll be shocked at what you learn there. This is a big one. I left in the mistyping here. Can you pick it up there? It just the first time I saw it, it was fun. So speak more ands and less buts. And let me describe this here. So I'm the CEO of the company. I have a board meeting, and if I have a challenge or whatever, I always try to go in and say we're having trouble with. And you always put the and here's some things we're doing to try to address it. It doesn't mean the and is right, but if you end that sentence with a period or a but, it just means you're not going to get it done. So if I just said we're having trouble with sales, and you're in my board, you're going, we don't got the guy here to run the company, right? So you always have an and what it does, it changes the discussion to solutions as opposed to problems. And you see a lot of this in the politics we're dealing with right now here. So in your conversation, start looking at how many times you hear people use the but or the period as opposed to the and just the fact you put an and doesn't mean it's right, but it gets people talking in the right direction. Does it make sense? More ands and buts. Okay. Think growth. Have a growth mindset, not a fixed one. Don't be safe in what you're doing. Think growth. If you're sitting here this morning, you probably have a growth mindset, so that's good. This is probably the number 4 tip here is the one that I probably hear the most that people really like. Who's on your personal board of directors? So this isn't a business thing. This is your personal board of directors. And it has to come from a variety of aspects of life here. And I just want to tell you this. If they're on your, actually say those words to them. Would you be on my personal board of directors? I mean, they're going to sit back and go, what does that mean? You know, it's not just will you help me out, will you be my mentor? It's a different kind of statement. Now, I tell you, though, once you ask somebody to be on that personal board of directors, you can't use them to get something. So if that's the person you want to have hire you, they shouldn't be on your personal board of directors. That's you don't want strings attached to it. You want people who are going to be really honest with you, and you want them from different aspects of life. And you need to change your personal board of directors frequently because life changes, or people just aren't good board of directors people. So people do this, and I get a lot of comments afterwards here. And then finally, create your own personal positive aggressive plan. This is something we did as a family. We'd always take our key areas of life, family, spiritual, emotional, physical. So you can pick your 6 areas you did. I do a hexagon because I'm a math teacher, so you have to do a little math in here, right? And you do 1 to 10. How am I doing in that? Or just generic. 1 to 10, how am I doing physically? Put the answer down. Here's the results I did one time. I was really looking bad on the physical side there, 3. So then what you do is you take each of those areas and just start to come up with some little things you could do that would move those numbers up a year from now. So I'll give you an example. I actually looked at one of these here, and physical was like quit drinking pop and have iced tea instead. I mean, it's a little one, but adds up, right? So that's how easy it was. Another one was, I'm trying to remember here, quit doing something and apply whatever I save there to my car loan, so I have less. So this little things, it all adds up. And you might have some big stuff in there, but don't make it all big stuff, because then you'll feel like you're making no progress. So I challenge you to do that and go from there. So now to kind of get towards the end here on positive aggressive, when I interview, I have a thing I call lightning round. And I'll just 1 to 10, I'll ask you questions. 1 to 10, how are you on communication skills? 5. 1 to 10, how are your written skills? 6. How technical are you, 1 to 10?
7.
7. So here's what happens here. In a very short amount of time, people will delineate their skill set. No one will give themselves the same grade for every aspect of it. So first of all, you got different people have different grading scales. Some people have bigger bell curves than others, right? So figure out that grading scale they have. But you're going to start finding out that, hey, this person said their written skills are 5, and I'm hiring to do a marketing job that's a lot of writing. I'm probably hiring for the wrong job. So it's kind of a fun way to learn a lot about them in a very short amount of time. And I was on a panel once with the CEO of Zappos. He did the same thing. He said, that's amazing. He goes, what's your last question? I go, whatever kind of pops in my head at the last minute. He goes, I always ask him 1 to 10, how lucky are you? And if they don't say a 9 or a 10, I probably don't want to hire them. I don't want their black cloud at Zappos, you know. And he said it's funny that 1 to 10, the people that say they're lucky sometimes had the least too. I mean, they had the least going for them, but they just had a positive attitude. So hang out with those 9s and 10s, and you'll be a lot happier in life too. I'll go real quick now. I think we're about right time there. So the entrepreneurial environment in Minnesota. When we started in '95, you were weird. You couldn't get a job at Target. I mean, what's wrong with you? You're in the basement. And I look back, and I can't believe we did. I had 4 kids. You know, they're the oldest ones in junior high. I have no savings for college. I mean, we had minimal debt, and your income is 0 for like many, many months. So I look back, I don't know why my wife let me do it, but she did. But back then, it was weird to be an entrepreneur. It didn't really change in 2002 either. Minneapolis didn't look up on that, it's starting to change quite a bit now, and there's just a lot more buzz here. This thing that Target just did with the Techstars was spectacular. There was nothing like that. I mean, you had no one to even meet with that was doing stuff like you were doing back then. So this is pretty important here. But you guys should do some stuff to help them there too. This is a great quote from one of my VCs, but entrepreneurship is about doing something for a few years that others won't do so you can live the rest of your life like others can't, or something like that. But, so I was going to say, if you're not an entrepreneur, maybe you're at a big company, you can still create the entrepreneurial environment for people. They need validation. They need references. Let them have a chance to have a shot at your business. It doesn't mean you give them the business, but you give them a chance. And I would tell you, like, for instance, a Compellant, the 38th state government that we got one of our systems installed in was Minnesota. I mean, give me a break. I mean, we're the fastest growing employer in town, and we can't get a meeting. And I knew the CIO personally, right? It was kind of like, well, it can't be good if it was done here. It was almost like that. So you need to have a different attitude if you're at a big company and encourage those things. And, I told Stephanie, Target had that reputation too. They wouldn't even talk to me, and the guy who ran their IT department used to work for me. I mean, we're good buddies. And it's weird. Now this Techstars thing, that's exactly what you need. You need to kind of hearten the entrepreneur and give him a chance to do it there. So there's a lot going on here, which is really neat. Let's see what else. And seek them out. Help them out there. It doesn't mean you have to, invest in them or whatever. Just help them out there. So kind of positive, aggressive. People are going to forget what you said. You're going to forget what I said here today. They'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget about how you made them feel. And I hope you can take a little positive, aggressive with you as you go out in the world today. And it's an honor to be here, and I really appreciate it. And we'll come back and have questions now, right? All right.
Well, we probably just have time for a couple questions,
I
but
talked too
maybe
long.
I have to start with one, because you mentioned it in the beginning, Phil, around not everything was a success right away, right? And you hit obstacles. Can you give us one of the biggest obstacles you hit and how you overcame it?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. That one software company that sold, right after I went and actually got a job with another tech startup here in town here, I got hired, and I got fired 2 months later. And the entrepreneur I went to work for was not a positive, aggressive guy. I mean, he was kind of a liar, cheater, stealer, whatever you want to say there. And so it wasn't going to work. So there was one where I went from job to no job, and then I said, I'm doing my own. I just want to do that. But what happens kind of too when those bad things happen, there's a little less safety net underneath you, and you're just a little grittier, and you compete a little hard. You have to make it work. You have 4 kids looking at you to feed and stuff. So that was an example of one where, the week before I started the company, I'd gotten fired. So not because of performance. This guy is it's a long story.
Do we have any questions in the room for Phil? I certainly have a bunch, but does anybody get a mic?
Go for it.
All right. Is your board of directors still in operation? Your personal board of directors?
I hear your history's written by the victors. So I have some people I use in different parts of my life. Now I'm thinking about, I have not said, are you on my personal board of directors? So that's actually, you caught me on that one. But I do have people in different aspects of my life that we do go to and talk about it. Okay. Yeah. Greg.
Phil, you've done a tremendous amount of work with Minneapolis charter schools, public schools, trying to transform education here in Minnesota. What can colleges learn from high-performing charter schools?
Ooh. God, he's always so hard, those questions he comes up with there. Well, I'd say one thing. So in education, in Minneapolis, the inner city education, it's really bad. You know it is, right? Now, I would tell you, since we really got involved 5 years ago, I actually think it's getting better. The numbers don't show it yet, but I can tell you a gazillion things are going better. Ben and I are doing a lot of work on it here. There's dozens of schools that are good, but I think the number one thing on these high-performing schools, they're in the toughest parts of town. Like I was in Harlem going to Success Academies. I mean, this is a tough environment, but their scores, their results academically are as good as Breck or Blake's here in town here. I mean, they're right up there. And I think the number one thing is there's a belief gap, that people don't believe that kid from a tough home environment or whatever can do it. So I think the number one thing that the college can learn too is, and the students, is the belief gap. If you don't think you can start a company in your basement, it's not going to happen, right? So I think the belief gap is probably the number one thing that people can walk away from learning from those schools, and those kids.
Another question? One more question? Right over here.
So not all of us are smart enough, like a Bill Gates, to drop out of school and kind of save money on those student loans to become entrepreneurs. And so for people like me or Michael over here who started Concordia's Entrepreneurs Club, graduating with debt is a reality. And those are going to be a couple $100 payments that are going to be coming every month. So how do you reconcile paying the bills, but at the same time allowing yourself to grow a company if that's your dream?
I got to crowdsource with all these people in the room here. You know, that's a tough one to turn your liability into an asset. But so a couple things. First of all, that story right there, who doesn't want to help you? So personal board directors, or ask people for help, or who doesn't want to kind of help you get going or whatever. So you might be able to find that actually is an asset, raising money coming from that environment there. I had 4 kids. I mean, those mouths were bigger than your loan payments, what they cost to feed and so that. Somehow you scrape through. Now I had lucky, so here's how we lived then. My wife taught piano lessons. So we were living on her piano lessons, and she didn't charge that much. So, somehow you scrape by, but I would tell you what will happen if you do it, is you're going to be hungrier because you don't have as much time to make it successful. You're going to find a way to accelerate what might take other people 6 months. You'll do it in 3 months because you don't want to miss out on those loans or something like that. So you got to turn it into an asset, and I think just maybe that grit and that determination might be the one that turns the tide. And don't forget, people want to help young people. I mean, who doesn't want to help somebody coming out of Concordia, 21 years old, fun, energetic? So leverage it.
I think what?
In the teaching profession, I'm married to a junior high math teacher, so I'm an academic social climber. Anyway, we lose so many good young teachers, leave the profession because they all move along on the same salary schedule and they don't get the recognition. I'm opposed to teacher tenure laws because I think we cannot pay the good people enough money to keep them in the profession. What can we do about that? Well,
You and I think very similar there. I mean, I look back when I left teaching. I actually loved teaching. I just knew I didn't want to teach that same. I'm too type A probably, right? But my last year, the guy across the hall from me, who'd been teaching for 30 years and was not a very good, I mean, kids would moon him in class. I mean, it was not pretty. I'd have 45 kids in my class. He'd have 8 because the parents all demand to have him in my class. He made 5 times more money than I did. And that grated on me, actually. Now, I think that it's got to come from the teachers as opposed to, up, top down or whatever. And there's more teachers that are trying to think that way or whatever. I think that'd have merit pay. I personally like to see us give fake dollars to the students, the parents, the peer faculty members, and that the teacher that really does a good job should make twice as much. Or I mean, to get through math with a great teacher, you guys all know your best teacher you had in junior high or high school, right? They should have made more than the other person. So I think it's got to come from within the teachers as opposed to externally, and I hope they do it because teachers are the solution. So. We got
Well, the problem is that the teachers' union kind of run the state of Minnesota.
there's some truth there.
Well, I was there for 28 years, and I know that.
Yeah.
And that's what's really frustrating to me, because we just got to get
Yeah.
better people into the profession.
And there's a group now called Educators for Excellence. It's just kind of a teacher-run organization. There's, I don't know, 1,000 members. They're trying to have that come from the teachers. And, unfortunately, sometimes you get into the union, you're not teaching anymore. So now you're worried about this as opposed to the kids and that kind of stuff. But, yeah.
I think that's an important topic that we could go on for quite some time.
Yeah.
I just think we should all give Phil a huge round of
Oh,
applause,
thanks,
and
Phil.
thank you again.
I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks. All right, thank you.
On behalf of Concordia College and the Offutt School of Business, let me again express our thanks to Phil Soran and Stephanie Lundquist for this great program and discussion. Phil, thank you for teaching us to be positive aggressive and for giving us a whole new meaning for B2B. It's something we'll never forget. And I expect that after your recent offer to students to ask for help, they'll all be up asking for help after we finish. Many people have helped make this event possible, but we'd like to especially thank our corporate partners who've supported us today. Our event sponsors, RDO Equipment and RDO Integrated Controls, U.S. Bank, and our table sponsors, Abbott Futures, Bell Bank, the Boulay Group, Norway House, and Target. But I also want to especially thank Rachel Hallstatt, who is the sponsor of the Hallstatt Women Mentoring Program that we have here in the Twin Cities. And you may have noticed that many of the students who are here today are young women, and they came down last night for an event that has been going on now for about 5 years. And so we really thank you for helping us get our young Cobber women out on the right foot. So thank you, Rachel, as well. Finally, I would be completely remiss if I did not also thank the hard work of Carol Hedberg, our event manager, for making certain that this event goes off every single time without a hitch. If you have suggestions for future speakers or are interested in learning more about ways to engage our students as mentors or with internships, please see any of our staff after the program. If you'd like to be on the mailing list for future events, please feel free to leave your business card in the bowl on the registration table as you leave. And finally, we invite you to join us for the next edition of Offutt School Presents this spring on March 22nd at the Doubletree in downtown St. Paul. We'll be pleased to welcome Doug Baker, Chair and CEO of Ecolab, as our next presenter. We look forward to seeing you at what we know will be a great conversation. Thank you for coming. Have a great day and go out and be lucky.